My name is Alberto Medina, and I am the author of We Reserve the Right of Admission, which is premiering, having its world premiere at the Flamboyant Festival on June 8th here in Colorado. We Reserve the Right of Admission is a play about the history of the relationship between the United States and Puerto Rico from 1898 to the present. It's a parody or a satire or a farce, even you could call it, about what has been a farcical relationship between the U.S. and Puerto Rico since the U.S. invaded in 1898 and has kept Puerto Rico as a colony to this day. So in the play, this character who embodies Puerto Rico, or specifically embodies the pro-statehood movement in Puerto Rico, which has been dominant, goes to the United States throughout the decades, through more than a century, and he asks for statehood over and over and over again, and he barely gets to talk to the United States itself, right? This character, called the United States, he is instead mostly talking to the secretary, who sort of keeps him at bay, keeps telling him, this is what we're doing, this is what we're not doing, and, both prevents him from actually speaking to power, right, to the person actually making the decisions in the room where it happens, as it were, to quote another play, but also, embody some of the ways in which the U.S. has manipulated the relationship with Puerto Rico, manipulated Puerto Ricans in a way, to not fully understand, what is happening, what isn't happening, what isn't possible when it comes to the U.S.-Puerto Rico relationship. I wrote this play because in my advocacy, as part of Boricuas Unidos en la Diáspora, or BUD-PR, which is an organization of Puerto Ricans in the U.S. who advocate for decolonization and independence, and also in my own writing personally, as someone who cares deeply about Puerto Rico's independence and has had a lot of conversations, has written a lot of articles, has had a lot of debates with people about this topic. One of the main points that I always make and our organization always makes is it's been 120, now almost 127 years. In July of 2025, it'll be 127 years since the United States has held Puerto Rico as a colony. It's been 127 years in which the United States could have made Puerto Rico a state if it had wanted to. And I always, repeat that number as often as I can, because it boggles the mind, or it should boggle the mind, 127 years of colonialism and 127 years of the United States refusing to make Puerto Rico a state. But some people will say, well, it hasn't really been 127 years because, Puerto Ricans didn't really want statehood until more recently, didn't really vote for statehood until more recently. And, these local plebiscites or votes that are sometimes held about Puerto Rico's status, there have been 7 of them now. The United States has ignored all of them, which is something that you can see in the play as well. But people will say that, people will say it's not that the U.S. has been ignoring, Puerto Rico's request for statehood for more than a century, because that request has been more recent, and the U.S. has been waiting for the Puerto Rican people to decide, has been waiting for consensus, has been waiting for a strong majority for statehood or what have you, and that's only happened, according to some people, in the last few years. So it's really only been a little bit, and the fight continues, as it were. And I always think that that's just a very ahistorical notion of what the U.S.-Puerto Rico relationship has been like. It's a very naive notion of what the United States is and does and has done as a country, not just in Puerto Rico, which it controls, but all around the world, really. The United States is a country that, when it finds a government it doesn't like, in Latin America or in the Middle East or whatever it may be, it finds ways to get rid of that government, right? Especially, in the early and middle parts of the 20th century, more directly, right, through invasions and coups and all of that, maybe a little more indirectly now. But this idea that the United States is just so respectful and so deferential to the will of a people, especially a brown people in the Caribbean, that it's just been waiting for Puerto Ricans to have this political will that they can act on. It just doesn't hold up. It doesn't hold up to the historical record of what the U.S. has done, both in Puerto Rico and around the world. So this play is a little bit of an answer to those people, to to walk them through and to show them what has actually happened in the relationship, to show them how time after time after time, from 1898 when the U.S. invades to, the early 20th century when it decides these court cases that basically say Puerto Rico is going to be property. Puerto Rico is going to be, owned by the U.S. It's going to be, but it's not going to be part of the U.S., right? There's this famous phrase in those court cases that says, Puerto Rico belongs to, but it's not a part of the United States, and that is still the law of the land in the U.S. to this day. When you look at 1917, when Puerto Ricans get citizenship, well, why give Puerto Rican citizenship but not make Puerto Rico a state? That's a question the play tries to answer. And then throughout the decades and into the 1940s and 50s, when the U.S. finally allows Puerto Rico to elect its own governor, to write its own constitution, but what does it really mean for a colony to have a constitution? And then in these more recent decades, as Puerto Ricans have been having these local plebiscite votes and choosing sometimes the status quo, sometimes statehood, more recently choosing something different, which you can get a sense of in the play at the end as well. What has been the United States attitude toward these votes? If supposedly they've been waiting for the Puerto Rican people to speak and to decide and waiting to act on what the Puerto Rican people want, well, has that actually happened? What does that actually look like in recent years? So this kind of historical accounting, which I realize may sound very boring, but I promise the play is funny, is an answer to those people who think that, the U.S. has just been sort of standing by, waiting for the Puerto Rican people to decide so that it can finally act to end Puerto Rico's colonial status. So I really hope that what people get out of watching this play is a little bit of an education, right? Especially for folks who are not familiar with the history of Puerto Rico, a little bit of a reassessment of what their, attitude or perspective might have been if they have had one about the U.S.-Puerto Rico relationship, about the idea of statehood, about the feasibility of statehood even. And I think mostly I hope that they're entertained. This is still theater, it's still art. I want it to be, and I hope that it is fun and funny and enjoyable to people. I think the best art is not didactic in the sense of trying to, beat you over the head with a lesson or a political point. I hope it's something that folks just absorb by watching something entertaining. But I think this is a play and a topic that's especially relevant right now, as we see, the current American government going back to the sort of bad old days of overt U.S. imperialism and thinking about annexing Greenland or Canada or the Panama Canal, or who knows what they'll think of next. Which is also very interesting to think about in the context of the conversation about Puerto Rico's status, because, I think Donald Trump has talked about making Canada the 51st state in a matter of months, more than U.S. politicians have talked about making Puerto Rico the 51st state for the last few decades. I think he's talked about annexing Greenland more than anyone in U.S. politics have talked about annexing Puerto Rico in many, many, many decades. So what does that tell you about whether the U.S. really is interested in the will of the people of those places, right, of those nations that it would like to include and annex and invade even for imperial purposes, versus the U.S. just sort of doing what it wants and, damn whatever the people in those places actually think about it. So it's an interesting and important time to think about imperialism and colonialism and what that means and what we should do about it. All my work, I hope, is a call to action, is a call to kind of have an awakened sense of responsibility on these issues. One of the other big things that I say and talk about and write about and fight against is this idea that issues like Puerto Rico status are for Puerto Ricans to decide, and that, Americans just need to get out of the way and not say anything, not do anything, because it's inappropriate for them to do so. I hope the play shows that that's not the case. I hope the play shows that it's the United States that is in charge, has always been in charge on these issues. And as long as that's the case, it's up to Americans who are the voters and constituents and folks who can actually, pull on the levers of power and pressure their political leaders to take action. Those are the ones who actually can do more about it than Puerto Ricans, as uncomfortable as that is to say. That's just a feature of the colonial relationship. So it's an important time to have those conversations, and I hope that the play contributes to those conversations in some small way. So I hope you'll come see. We reserve the right of admission on June 8th in Flamboyant Theater in Lakewood, Colorado. You can go to flamboyanttheater.com for tickets and to learn more about not just my play, but the other plays that will be on stage that day, and this entire Puerto Rican festival that John Marcantoni and Flamboyant Theater have put together. It's going to be a really exciting day to celebrate Puerto Rican arts and culture here in Colorado. And I hope you will keep reading, watching, listening, thinking about Puerto Rico. As I said, this July it'll be 127 years of a colonial relationship with the United States. And I hope that all of you watching this video, watching this play, will become partners and allies in the cause of Puerto Rico's decolonization and the cause of freedom and justice for all people around the world. Thanks, everybody.